episode 20 of the Brannigan Communications podcast. I am your host, Jasmine Spalding, and I am here with Sally Brannigan and Julie Doherty. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you guys today on this gloomy Monday?
It feels fallish, that's for sure.
I love fall.
Me too. It's my favorite.
I know, I enjoy it.
We have birthdays in fall.
So it's extra special.
Yes.
Celebratory.
Yeah, that's great. So today we are kind of talking about this small yet very important thing in Milwaukee called Small-waukee. I don't know if anyone has any knowledge about our backgrounds, but we are all coming from a different perspective. Sally, I know you are not from Milwaukee, so do you want to explain your background and where you grew up and how you ended up here for those who might not know?
Well, I spent most of my adult time until our first child was born in Seattle, so bigger city, complete with the problems of traffic and not being able to afford to live close to your work because the cost of living is so high. So Milwaukee was a wonderful transition for us, especially heading into a time when we wanted to be able to be at home, and sometimes we're trapped at home because you have little kids and needed to be able to get to work quickly. Yeah, so Milwaukee's been just the perfect combination for us of big city kind of cultural opportunities and yet easy to get around and a real network, like you run into people you know. Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, my dad was in the service, so we moved around a lot to different cities. Mostly we lived in suburbs or outside of big cities and on Air Force bases. But as a child, I don't think you really pay that much attention. Mm-hmm. What you have seems normal to you. Then we lived in Seattle. I went to college there, so it was pretty much big city life until we got here. So Milwaukee's been refreshing and just a great place to work and raise a family.
Yeah. So when did you come across this Small-waukee idea?
I guess it didn't occur to me until we got to the point where we were trying to buy a house here. And then we had, even at a low-ish income when we started out, we could still be close to downtown in a reasonable place to live, mm-hmm. which would not have ever happened in Seattle, certainly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
On one income, so that one of us could stay home with Katie. Yeah, it was nice.
It's a lot. And Julie, I know that you are born and raised in Wisconsin.
I am.
So coming from a native perspective, has the idea of Small-waukee always been really obvious to you, or was it something you didn't think about? Or
I think for my family it's always been really obvious. My dad was a salesman, so we grew up and he knew everybody. We'd go places and he would know anybody that was in the place. Yeah. So I feel like my family has that vibe of knowing there's connections to people through different, I don't know.
All of your circles interconnect.
Yeah, different circles.
It's a Doherty magic.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess we should probably explain what Small-waukee is for those who may not know. So it's this idea and this notion that people in Milwaukee are always separated by X amount of individuals.
It's essentially 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, essentially it's saying that even though we are a city, we tend to kind of meet people and be easily connected to individuals that we didn't know we could be connected to due to this other connection. Something like that, along those lines. So, so what does that mean to you? How has that impacted you personally or professionally?
So I have a good story that's more on the personal side. So about 10 years ago, I had joined a gym or whatever, and this girl started working out with me, and we were just talking, and I think we became Facebook friends or whatever, and one day she came up to me and she's like, "Oh, is Mike Hamill your brother-in-law?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he married my sister or whatever." She's like, "I grew up right next door to his mother, and I'm named for his grandmother, and they have the same birthday." I'm like, "What?" This girl I met was named after my brother-in-law's grandma.
That is wild.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing. So, they grew up knowing each other, and like have all this family, people in common, and it's just crazy that like those kinds of things happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, go ahead.
Oh, no, go.
Oh, professionally, I mean, there's always people you meet that know other people. I'm trying to think. I don't have a specific example working at the moment. I have to think about that.
That's fine. We can come back. I know that a couple, like, while talking to Brannigan people, people kind of have ended up at Brannigan because of a third party that they end up meeting. I know Grace is one of them. She was a student of Kathleen's, and that's how she ended up interning, thus being here for a couple years now. Sally, I know you probably know a lot more professionals in the area, possibly. Has there ever been a moment where you see like a Small-waukee come to life?
I feel like this whole, like, Brannigan, the company, is kind of a Small-waukee phenomenon, because like you said, we tend to hire people, we choose the best candidate, but it often ends up being somebody that somebody else has already worked with or knows. And we have a great culture and a nice kind of, even the non-work side of our relationships, I think, is really supportive, and friends, like, we're friends, and you see it in the work and in the fun that we have. And I think that's partly because of the size of the city and the nature of that Midwestern kind of friendliness. I remember when Tom and I were dating, I came back a couple times at Christmas time to spend the after Christmas time with his family, and we would always go back to Seattle on the same plane, and the conversation, it never failed. It would come up like, why is everybody so nice? You just go into a store and people are nice. It's very like neighborly in a way that I don't think the coasts are. I think maybe I feel like our pace is not slow, but our friendliness is there. And Milwaukee really exhibits that. And I think we have the benefit of the major employers and the major businesses in town. It's a small enough number of them that you really have to cross over. Like, never do you leave a workplace and not run into people from that same workplace again at a next job or at a different, with a different client. Everybody's kind of moving in the same circle. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, me being fairly-ish, new-ish, I don't know. When do you stop considering yourself new to a city? I'm not really sure.
Somebody told me when we moved here, they said, you won't feel at home. So we moved from Seattle to Milwaukee. You won't feel at home until 2 years have passed, but it'll be almost exactly 2 years. And I was like, oh, I'm very adaptable. It'll be one.
Yeah.
I give myself 1 year. And then at 1 year, I didn't even think about it. I was so like underwater. But at almost exactly 2 years, all of a sudden I had this epiphany. I'm like, oh, I really do feel like it's home here.
Yeah.
So I feel like I give that time even at a job. That seems long, but it just takes that long to really get your bearings.
Yeah, I know, especially being from Chicago, I moved away after college and then never really moved back to Chicago. And prior to being here, I was living in Central Illinois, which was a very small area that we were in. And it's weird coming to a city that obviously isn't as large as, Seattle or Chicago, but it still felt small. Like, I loved the, like, no traffic. Like, even to this day, I overestimate how long it takes me to get to point A to point B just because I'm so used to there being, like, traffic and accidents. So that part is great. But even then, like, being new to anywhere, like, you don't know anyone and, like, you don't know, like, who the big businesses are. It was just very odd to move somewhere and literally have no one know who you are or, like, what you're doing there. So anyways, long story short, when I moved here, I kind of started to, like, build my network, and I'm still doing that now. So I had a friend whose aunt owns a business here, who then I sat down and had an informal interview just to, like, pick people's brains. I know we talked about that phrase before. And then that person introduced me to the young professionals group that I'm involved in now. So it's just like a long, like, chain of people that you have to get through, but eventually you start to build, like, oh yeah, that person's from there and that person's from there. Like, you get the notion of Small-waukee, but still with the benefits and, like, the positive aspects of being in a city.
And I think it's interesting because I've always been here, so I always, like, you always know people or know of people who know people. It's just like growing up in this area. I think it's like I've never had to do that. Come in and not know anything or anybody.
It's an adjustment, but luckily, like you said, the Midwest mentality is really helpful because, it helped me because people have been really kind and willing to help. So that's always good.
I feel like it's kind of an antidote to our social media kind of culture that we have too. That real circles of people and people that you actually recognize when you're out and about, or that you work with and then end up doing informational interview or whatever it is. That actual face-to-face connection and recognizing someone makes you feel like you are part of a community in a way that's getting less and less common in the world, because so much of what we do is like you recognize people by their handle. That's sad to me when you know somebody by their handle and not their name or their face. There's a downside to all that.
So do you think Chicago and Seattle have any aspects of Small-waukee?
I'm sure it's like any business, like once you've been in a certain industry, you probably start to familiarize like key players, and like you probably do the same networking things, or you guys are invited to the same like community events or whatnot. But I don't know. Like I said, I haven't officially lived in Chicago since I left for college.
What about the community you grew up in?
So Chicago, like where I grew up in, like as a kid.
Yeah.
So it's Chicago. You have your neighborhoods, but like again, when you're little, like you don't really pay attention to those. Like the only thing I could really associate like a small feeling was my aunt and my mom. Like we lived blocks from each other, so it was always like family was always around, and that was like your community, I guess. And yeah, I mean, obviously once you get involved in school activities, you start seeing the same people, things like that. But that's my only experience from like Chicago as like a kid, not really as a young professional.
Interesting.
I feel like it does come down to neighborhoods in bigger cities. The neighborhoods and, like Jasmine said, the professional. So what you do dictates who you see more than it would in a smaller city.
Whereas I feel like all of southeast Wisconsin's almost the Small-waukee. Like if you know people like in the burbs, or it's not just the city
Milwaukee
of Milwaukee
proper.
Yeah, Milwaukee proper or whatever. It's because I didn't grow up in Milwaukee per se, but I feel like everybody knows everybody. And then you always ask where people went to high school, and because that'll tell you, about the area or other people they know.
Yeah.
So I always ask where people went to high school.
I've seen you do that. Even when people come to pitch you for like vendors and people come, she's always like finding the circle that they fit into.
It's good research.
Yeah. Well, I just met a vendor, and I'm like, I think your sister lived on the same floor as me in an apartment building, and I'm like, whoever, and he's like, oh yeah, she did. Like,
that's
it's just
funny.
like that type of thing. I'm like, oh yeah, we lived a couple doors down, and
yeah. So I'm sure that helps with like, as a business owner, how does that benefit you as a business owner and like a prominent individual in the Milwaukee area? Like that has to tie in somehow the notion of Small-waukee, right?
Well, I do think our client, if you look at our client list, it comes like the main clients that we have, there is some connection personally for Tom or Kathleen or somebody else who works here that's part of our specific culture. The chemistry with clients matters, and you end up working with people that you like to be around because it's enjoyable then.
Yeah, and they follow. If they go to a different company, they'll
Yeah, we
follow
have
you.
that.
Yeah.
That's good. So are there any downfalls to a Small-waukee notion?
I don't think so. I mean, sometimes when like you grow up in the area, you don't like, let's say, high school people. I don't always want to run into like high school people that I went to high school with.
That's fair, yeah.
Like, so I tend to live a little bit further from where I grew up. I mean, you still can run into people, but like, I guess that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I don't have any drawbacks.
Random people showing up at the grocery store, like then you weren't maybe friends with in high school, but you have to say hi to them and
Because you know
talk
them,
work.
and then it's like the
Yeah,
eye contact, and you're like,
I know.
oh,
Or you avoid
hi.
them. No, just kidding. You shouldn't avoid people.
Life lessons from
Yeah,
Julie.
life lesson from Julie. Just say hello and
Just say hello.
yeah, go about your day.
No, I always do. But yeah, that kind of thing, I think, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you tend to get less of that as you get older, like run into those kind of people.
Yeah.
I don't really see any drawbacks. I feel like Milwaukee's the perfect size. Like, I wonder sometimes if we hadn't been living here when Tom was thinking about starting the business, if it would have even worked in a different setting. It's so much our culture to have those relationships, and it's such a, and the business itself at that time, especially because it wasn't as digitally based, the business itself is sort of dependent on having a certain number of big companies and potential clients nearby, but balancing that with a smaller kind of culture and ethos, it's perfect. I feel like it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like I've been seeing that more and more as I've gotten into working in a communications firm and knowing about agencies. You know, everyone here comes from a, certain background of communications and PR and everything else that comes along with communications. But, it's nice to talk to, for example, Ashley, she'll have like some insights to other agencies or other experiences that she's worked with. So it's great to have that resource of like her being connected to other, individuals or places in the area, kind of get some more knowledge on that.
Yeah, I think the more you work in the city and other places, you develop that too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've only worked here too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think about like what's been the easiest place to like build a network for me, or like, I guess I spent quite some time in Central Illinois, so I felt like when we left that, I felt like I was leaving like a good chunk of people that I knew both personally and professionally, and it's a difficult transition, but
yeah. I feel like my family is its own little network.
That's true. We have kind of a big family extended.
Well, yeah,
That's
but
the difference.
like I was saying, my sister and my dad knew everybody, so it's like you run into people all the time, and my dad was so well connected in the community that,
That's
you
his
just knew
personality.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder about how the numbers would bear out if you looked at Milwaukee area generally, not just the city, compared to other areas in the country, even cities the same size, how the return rate compares. So like people leave for college or for a job but end up coming back. I feel like especially in our neighborhood where we live, there are tons of people who came back when they had kids, because Milwaukee is a place where there are job opportunities. Mm-hmm. It's a good size city with a good economy, and yet you can have a lifestyle that is geared around your family and is enjoyable in a way that it might not be in a bigger city. Mm-hmm. I bet the numbers are good compared to other cities for us.
I don't know, that'd be a good research topic / second podcast.
We should have come with numbers.
I know. I don't have numbers.
So, again, going back to, why is this an important topic, for professional development?
That's a good question.
Well, I feel like you can network more easily in a place where there is that kind of connection and circles that overlap.
Yeah, and if you work at, like I said, if you work at different places around town, or if you're in a certain, like, not industry, but like I'm in HR, so you get to know all the HR people, around town, or you join a group and you kind of network that way.
Yeah.
This might not be true, but I feel like there's also a difference in people are more accessible in a smaller big city, so your access to executives and people who have been in their field for a long time and are very accomplished, I feel like that is much better here than it would be in a bigger city, just because of the number of people there are and the number of companies and the time that they have to allocate. So I feel like you have the benefits of a small town, like you're everybody's family in a way.
Yeah, I think especially like back in the days, like, my grandmother was the head nurse at St. Mary's, so, like, I feel like a lot of people, you mentioned that, like, my last name is Doherty or whatever, they're like, oh, we knew your grandmother from, because she was, like, one of the bigger, nurses at St. Mary's, and she helped people have it's just like that stuff too.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And if you have a specific question or a specific expert that you want to get a hold of, there's a good chance you can find somebody who knows somebody who can get you their phone number and their ear for 10 minutes.
Yeah. I feel like, talking about professional development, work makes a lot of networks.
Yeah, definitely. Are there certain places are pretty common for these Small-waukee interactions to happen?
Okay, this isn't personal interaction, but if you live here or if you visit here, you just have to go to the waterfront and stop for a minute and think how rare it is to be in a city this size and have that long strip of park space, like open space. And you can just drive down there, park your car on the side of the street, and you're right there at the lake in one of the most beautiful spots in the world. And it's so easy to get there. That whole, that would never happen in Chicago or Seattle. Beautiful waterfront, sure, but it's a hassle to get there and use it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
I feel like a lot of things just happen organically, like you go to a restaurant or a bar, or you go out to the you just run into people. I wouldn't say there's a specific spot that I know of that, you run into people all the time.
Yeah.
that's part of the beauty of it, is that they're everywhere. Like, you run into them depending on what your phase of life is.
You just start making small talk or talking to somebody, and then I always try to find a connection to somebody.
Yeah.
So I'm always asking, like I said, where'd you go to high school, or where, so you try to make a connection like that.
Yeah.
I like to do that. Just
Yeah,
if
no,
I know
that's good.
of anybody they know of or whatever.
Yeah.
That's why people love to talk to you, Julie, because they're all, that's like that open-ended kind of get their info.
Yeah, I think I get that from my dad, and
Yeah, it is
my
kind
family's
of,
like that. So.
it's nice.
That's a good skill to have, because
Yeah.
not everyone can just do that, or like to do that, I suppose. So what's something that you would want our listeners who may or may not be from Milwaukee, but if they're not from Milwaukee, what's something that you want people to know about our city?
Okay, that shouldn't be hard. I feel like I used up my good answer on the
On the lakefront?
the lakefront. Yeah.
Yeah, the lakefront was good. It's not inexpensive, but it's
It's reasonable.
reasonable.
It's affordable.
Affordable to live here, and if people start a family here, and it's a big enough city to get the city feel, but it's not as crazy as Chicago or. I was just in Chicago this weekend, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
couldn't live there.
nicely situated for getting, you can be in Chicago in an hour and 15 minutes.
That's all I need.
So if you want even bigger city, you can go there, or you can go north, Door County, or even as close as, if you head out of town, by 20 minutes out of town, it feels like you're really in farmland.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole different vibe.
Yeah, totally. If you leave, go an hour away, you feel like you're away from the city, and it's only an hour away, so that's nice.
Yeah. I keep telling friends or family, come visit. It's really not that far. Chicago to Milwaukee is not bad. And then they get here, oh yeah, it's not that far. And you guys have, I'm yeah, I don't know what people think Milwaukee is, but we have the lakefront, we have coffee, we have restaurants, we have bars, we have.
Yeah. We have lakes.
Yeah, we have outdoor beer gardens, parks, literally anything that you could want and think
You
of.
know what's funny? I listened to a blog or a podcast. It's like a food comedy show from Seattle. It's hilarious. Sometimes it's a little off color, so be warned, but hilarious. And they are sponsored by Milwaukee Tourism, which is hilarious to me.
Huh.
And they tout various things, sometimes things I haven't heard of in the ads. I'm like,
Interesting.
why are we advertising in Seattle? But
I don't know.
I couldn't imagine growing up anywhere else.
Yeah, I guess if you
if you've always been here, I don't know.
I truly never thought I for sure I was after college, I'm moving back to Chicago, that's the place I know, that's the place I grew up in, that's what's gonna happen, but life clearly had different plans for me, so.
Yeah, you were meant to be in at Brannigan.
Yeah, there we go. So we're talking about all the benefits of Small-waukee. So if someone who's living in the area and listening to this podcast, if they feel like they're not taking advantage of this, or like they haven't heard of this before, or they haven't experienced this, is there anything that you recommend on, you know, what they could do to maybe immerse themselves a little bit more in the city, whether that be personally or professionally?
I think, like, I bring it back to that connection thing, like, just strike up a conversation with somebody and find a common ground or a connection with somebody, and then it usually leads to something else. You know, even at the grocery store or shopping or at a bar or restaurant or at work. I mean, I think it'll always lead to new opportunities, work or personally.
I think the answer would be the same-ish, no matter where you were, but in Milwaukee specifically, maybe this is the whole Midwest, I feel like there's this time when it gets to be springtime and summer where Milwaukeeans in specific know you have like 2 to 3 good months, and that's it, where you'll be outside and be really a little freer from work and have beautiful weather, and everybody gets happy and interactive. That's the time
true.
to pounce for your networking.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
just converse with everyone you can.
Yeah.
Plus, also, don't like do everything on email and like
talk to people.
messaging. Yes, pick up the phone
face-to-face
go
or-
like just set up a meeting. Set up a meeting
Yeah.
instead of doing it digitally. Sometimes the efficiency that you gain is not worth it because that little chit chat yields a conversation about who you know.
You can't really get to know somebody unless
Yeah.
you meet them in person.
And
I
those
don't think.
those kind of organic circles and how they cross over will only come out if you can relax and enjoy each other for a minute.
Yeah. Good point, Sally.
That's a good point. Nice. Well, thanks for listening. I appreciate your insight into Small-waukee. For those who are listening, make sure to follow us on Instagram at Brannigan Communications. And to listen to this episode and many more, you can find us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast.